We head out to Tennessee to look at the team that traded their best fantasy asset. Let's see if they can, I suppose, get any better. Mate, my intros are getting worse, but my excitement to talk about the Grizzlies is right up there. Mate, the Memphis Grizzlies, they made some changes this offseason, didn't they?
Did, and they probably came a little bit worse. I'm impressed that you've ironed your shirt. You've got your Memphis Grizzly gear on. Is that your hat? Show me the other side. What are you wearing? Oh no, I was fooled by the colours. Oh dear, He's in between two camps.
Oh,
Thought it was at least
I
we've
didn't
got a
actually
man wearing a Charlotte Hornets hat.
Yeah, I didn't actually think about that. I just went to the cupboard real quickly because the kids were running rampant, and I was trying to get away from my wife because you like to
Yeah,
podcast at the wee hours of the morning, like 7 p.m.
that's
But
me.
mate, look, Memphis are my favorite team. I was disappointed when they traded out. Let's talk about their biggest out, and it was Desmond Bane. Mate, like he was the fantasy asset. Like a couple years ago, he won me every league by me taking him off waivers after watching the first game. Because I always sit there and, one of my favorite pastimes is watching the first Grizzlies game of the season and just seeing how the rotation works out. And man, like it's big balls to trade your borderline all star. They're not thinking about fantasy, but he was a glue piece for this team.
100%. And I like to talk about Swiss Army knife guys, and he could kind of do it all. Like he could fit into any position with his little pterodactyl arms. He could play not pterodactyl, Tyrannosaurus. His little Tyrannosaurus arms. He could still play D pretty heavily. He got assists. He could get rebounds. He's a little solid nugget. He could shoot the lights out, and he really was. I feel like I think of someone like Suggs as being the heart and soul of a team like Orlando. And I kind of felt like that was who Bane was on this team. And I know the heart and soul isn't the 10th category in category league, so it's not really something we need to really focus on. But I think it's going to have a ripple effect, and I think he's going to be really missed on this team. Especially, he's replaced by KCP, who to me he might be a legend. I don't know him. I'll never know him, but I feel like he's just not that same kind of energy guy. He seems like more like a paycheck collector than Bane, who I feel would have maybe felt a little blindsided by this trade this year. Do you know more about that? How unhappy was he, and how blindsided was he on the way
Do
out?
I know about it? Well, I was watching a podcast or an interview, and he was at Orlando Disneyland with his wife, and he got the phone call. And yeah, no, he was completely blindsided. Did seem like one of those guys that would play in Memphis for a long time. But as a fan, when I step back and look at it, I am not that disappointed because I do think that they got an excellent haul for him. I do think that looking back now that this draft has been and looking at the draft capital that they got for Desmond Bane, I do think in the long run this will be really good for us, and honestly probably really good for Orlando because they got the best player. You can have a look at it in our trade chatter. It came out a few days ago on YouTube, but one of those win-win situations. I felt better about it once they traded up from the 16th pick to get Cedric Coward, who was, of course, the number 11th pick. I think that man will be unbelievable in this team. Maybe not straight away, but I think that he'll make an impact.
So are Memphis making a run at things this year? Is this a rebuild? Like, where are they sitting? They kind of seem to be in the midst of either. Like, Jar's not getting any younger, and neither's Triple J. But they've got these young guys in. They've got Scottie Pippen Jr. They've got Coward. They've got Edie. So they're kind of. I don't understand who they are and what their identity is this year.
I would say it's a retooling. Like you can look at the fact that they finished 8th and be disappointed in 48 and 34. But the LA Lakers were 50 and 32 and they finished 3rd. My thing is, I don't think that they got worse after they traded Bane. I actually just don't think that they got better. And I think a lot of teams around them, like if you listen to yesterday's show about the LA Clippers, they got a little bit better. If you look at the Lakers, I think they got a little bit better. You look at the Rockets, I think they got better. I think some of these other teams got better around them, which will just keep them stagnant. Which, in a lot of ways, if you're going to be stagnant, getting younger is the direction you want to go. And Bane going, like, Bane probably wasn't an extremely high usage guy, but Bane leaving does give some opportunity to some other players.
Definitely. And I know that you and I, as this podcast unfolds, it's probably the first team preview we've done where we're a little bit heated on who we think is going to be in the starting 5. But I guess we start with one that we're absolutely locked together with, which is Ja Morant. What is he going to do this year? Is he going to behave himself? Is he going to stop sitting? Is he going to stop getting hurt? There's so many different factors that keep him off the court. He makes me so nervous.
Yeah, and you said it. I gave you a call on the way home, mate. You said it when you were speaking about some of their additions in blokes like Ty Jerome and stuff. Like, you saw Ty Jerome getting signed as insurance for Ja Morant. I saw them getting him as a genuine backup, but yeah, like when you have a look at that depth chart, there is some real question marks about whether the backup is Ty Jerome, whether it is Scottie Pippen, and you think maybe even one of these guys could start at shooting guard.
That's what I do think. You got it 100% right. Yeah, I'm thinking they tried it last year, and I feel like it worked. And I think they're going to keep Scottie Pippen Jr. at the 2. That leaves Ty Jerome in a position where he can be the backup to Ja, and then they're flexible with the 2. When they need defense, they've still got KCP. Wells can play down to that position if he needs to, but I think he's relatively assured of being the 3 this year again. But yeah, no, I know that you think Coward might get a run maybe earlier than I think. They showed that under different coaching staff, they showed that they did that last year with Wells. He was a rookie who started and then just never found the bench again. Edie, as a guy who was a rookie last year, coming into his second year, like, they're not afraid to play young blood. So maybe I'll be receiving a little bit of hate, and you might be having the last laugh in the end with your starting lineup predictions.
Well, I don't like. I've Cedric Coward playing a lot of meaningful minutes. Was just really high. Like, when you think about it, they moved heaven and earth and to get him.
Yep.
And they went and moved Bane, whether they knew that they were targeting Coward. That sort of put them in the position in which they could get him. And he's not like a super polished, I suppose, sort of guy, but 6'6", shoots 38% from the 3. Big, long, over, huge wingspan. I think it was 7. 2.25. There you go. Wingspan. Just a guy that was absolutely huge and larger than life in college. Now they've went and got him. I don't think that he'll start. I think Kentavious Caldwell-Pope will start with Jalen Wells. And I think Jalen Wells performing so well is why they were fine to trade Desmond Bane and allowed them to take a punt and get younger in Cedric Coward. So my starting lineup is Ja, KCP, Jalen Wells, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Brandon Clark to start the year. But of course, the plan is Zach Edey. I think every time that they started Jaren Jackson Jr. at center, while it was good for fantasy, it wasn't conducive to winning basketball. So I don't see that sort of happening.
Well, we obviously agree on the bookends. We've got Ja at one end, and we've got Edey and Triple J at the other end. So there's definitely some assured pieces that would be kind of ridiculous for us to argue any other way. I worry a little bit with KCP in the starting lineup that they've got 3 defense first guys, and Edey in Wells and in KCP, and that's going to put so much offensive pressure on Ja and Triple J that it might be overwhelming. I know in my heart of hearts that they probably will go that. Like KCP just seems to start on whatever team he's on. That's just the role that he fills. But yeah, the logical side of me thinks they tried it last year. It worked all right. Scottie Pippen can be an offensive threat. And I just think when we're looking at 5 positions, I'd want 3 guys out there who know how to put points on the board.
Yeah, I mean that would be the best thing for fantasy. But we know that this is, I suppose, classically been a slower kind of team. Look, we touched on our starting lineup. We disagree a little bit, but look, Ja Morant, I've got him at 40. You've got him at 58. He was the 61st ranked player last year. His current ADP is at 40, about where I've got him. I do think that he's a guy that has always been overdrafted, but he has always missed time. Look, I'm really hoping for Thomas Islo. I'm really hoping for him. I'm really hoping for my favorite basketball team that he can put it together. But I do think that this iteration with Zach Edey, who's not back until November, and these other defensive first guys out there, like, tell me a better pick and roll point guard than Ja Morant. You've got that big body in Zach Edey when he's back, and I think that he will be able to absolutely cook. I think that the additions for this team allow for Ja Morant to be that volume scorer. And again, being the guy with the ball in his hands, he is going to be the facilitator. And it's only when he goes to the bench that, in my opinion, Scotty and Ty Jerome are going to even be allowed to cook.
And I don't play, and I know you. I think you're only in a league where we play any sort of points league, so we're very 9-cat focused. I know that Ja Morant's an absolute stud in points leagues, and people who are moving between the two probably lose sight of that a little bit and think that his value remains the same in 9-cats. He's probably one of the players in the NBA who's less than the sum of his parts. Like he can do so much. He is such an exciting guy to watch. But when you break it down in a fantasy lens, you're like, okay, the scoring's okay. The assists are pretty good. The percentages get a little bit iffy, like he probably definitely compared to a league average. I'm assuming he doesn't take as many threes as other starting point guards playing that much time do. Like he loves to beat himself up. He loves to run it against the trees and do some magical, like dark magic wizardry garbage and bounce the ball off an umpire's head and it goes in, like, and everybody cheers. But yeah, I always seem to. I never target Ja Morant, but I never seem to get him because there's always someone who's more keen than me.
Yeah, and look, he was the 60th ranked player. I'm just taking out Desi Bane's usage and some of that. Like Desmond Bane, when push come to shove, in my opinion, from watching as a fan, was the backup ball handler a lot of the time. I do think that, yeah, he was even able to be the primary ball handler at times. You said that they probably had their best success with Scottie Pippen Jr. at the 2. You take Desmond Bane out of that, you start taking his usage out of that, and I think there's a bit of an opportunity for Ja Morant to go up. And I'm really struggling with point guards this year, which is not something I've really struggled with in the past. And it's probably like somebody like Garland I'm super high on, not back until November. I've drafted LaMelo over the years. I'm trying not to, get hurt again. I'm not super high on taking somebody like Derek White, or De'Aaron Fox is getting taken 10 spots earlier than that. I just think Ja Morant is like in a tier of his own in there. And like obviously not top tier when it comes to fantasy, but exciting, something you can't get around that 40. yeah, I do think that he is something pretty special, and you can get him around that 40. And the guards that you're taking late, they have so many deficiencies.
Green. You know, like
Uh,
I just think last year watching again, fantasy hat off, real life NBA fan on, there were so many times where Desmond Bane got that team out of the mud. You know, things would slow to a halt. Ja would do these ones where he'd be like, I don't know what to do. He'd look over at Triple J and he'd be like, well, I don't know what to do. And then Bane would just go like, leave it to me, boys. I can get us back in this. And he did. Are they hoping that they can see like a bit of a monumental jump in Wells this year, and he stops just being this defense first kind of guy who's out there as a disruptor and a bulldog, you know, almost like Lou Dort style? Are they going to try and cultivate him into some sort of like offensive option too? Like, who I've got Sandy Aldama as being the third, you know, attacking threat on this team, and besides maybe some early games where they're in a bit of trouble at the 4 and 5 as those boys recover, he's not going to be out there. So is it Wells? Like, what do they want from him this year?
I mean, I think Sandy Aldama is going to play a lot of minutes, but predominantly be in that sixth man role. I don't think Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5 worked at all. But yeah, I do think that Wells could make the next step up in his offensive game. I do think that they wouldn't have traded him unless they're super high on that, unless they think Coward is that guy super early. But yeah, you're right. I'm not very excited for KCP, I suppose, being my number 2. It's a bit harder to run a show when we disagree on the starting lineup, when we base off the starting lineup. But I'm less high on KCP even drafting him. I don't really want to draft Scottie Pippen Jr. Like, if he does get that role that you're thinking, then yeah, I'd take him at 130. I don't think he's going to get that role. I'm happy to take a punt on Ty Jerome late, like I'm talking 150s. And Jalen Wells, I actually don't think that he's super relevant for Supercoach for fantasy at all. And
Soon,
apparently,
Supercoach, soon.
yeah, soon Supercoach. So that's not where I'm excited. But once you trade Desmond Bane from this team, you mentioned he was the 26th ranked player last year. Um, your best fantasy asset is Jaren Jackson Jr. He was the 36th best player last year. Was probably a little bit overdrafted, if I'm being completely honest. But now I feel like he's kind of getting underdrafted. I saw him go really late in an ESPN league that we did the other day. I see he's drafted 47 in ESPN leagues, 22 in Fantrax leagues. And I do think people doing their drafts in Fantrax have a little bit more of an idea. I expect him to go in the 20s, and I've ranked him in my 20s. But does he get better with this lineup? Does he get worse? Is he needed to expect more? I expect more blocks while Zach Edey's out, but then does he go back into that 3-point shooting kind of threat? Where do you sit with Jaren?
Well, if you'll take a little ride with me in my fantasy time machine back to the year 2022, 2023, where Jaren Jackson was a 3 block per game man, which seems a wild concept now, where how excited we used to get about that. This is pre-Wemby, where blocks is what Wemby's stat line starts with when he's in the starting lineup, and they just build from there. But, you know, that's 2 seasons removed from now. What is he? He's like a 1 point. He's around 1.5, maybe 1.4 or 1.3. Like, he's not a special blocks guy anymore. He is a little bit of a faux unicorn, like a Kristaps Porzingis, in the fact that he can shoot threes. He has offensive diversity. He can defend. What I like about him too is there's not a lot of guys in the league who are 1+ steal, 1+ block, and he is both of those things, and that's always nice when you're creating a stocks type build. Having someone that can do that night in, night out is scrumptious. But I think, it's wild to think in 2 seasons his block averages have literally halved ever since Adams moved on. But the defensive numbers he was getting were at the 4, so I don't think he's probably going to get much better at the start of the season, where he probably is going to play 5 until Edie can come back and take the seat. Do you see a reality where he at least gets to 2 blocks a game again? I think 3's gone, but is there a 2 block reality?
Yeah, we get so hung up on like 0.2s and 0.3s when it comes to blocks. Of course, I'm going to see stretches where he wins you a week because he does get 3 blocks for 3 games in a row and has a game with 4 blocks. But yeah, I do think that sort of 1.5 to 2 blocks is where it will sit, which is still elite. Like, I just do think that where he's being drafted, if you did, I mean, he's a lot more stable. He's kind of like Kristaps Porzingis is kind of a Jaren Jackson Jr. from Wish, or like more of an injured Jaren Jackson Jr. You kind of get the same things. So I did a build with you where I got Wemby and then I was taking Jaren Jackson Jr. in the back end of the second. And I really liked the way that my team was fleshing out. That's sort of the way. And then like I'd maybe look to a Porzingis or somebody like that later on in the draft. I do think that there's a world where this guy could be in the 20s, maybe even a second round guy. Not to be drafted in the second round, but just to be, yeah, honestly, like a top 20 guy, especially with Bane gone. Like you said it, they're going to be standing around looking and who's going to do this for us. And it's not going to be the rookie in Zach Edey. It's probably not going to be Jalen Wells. He's going to be defending their best player. KCP is going to be standing in the corner shooting 40% from 3. It's going to have to be Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ja when they're healthy. So I am expecting him to step up and be in the top 30 this year.
Yeah, and I think I can see a reality where that happens. I worry that too much of his value comes from those blocks, and I worry that when he's now basically being the second guy with Bane gone, that he isn't superhuman. He could probably, if he's increasing things on the offensive end, something's got to give, and that goes on the defensive end. They also need him to stay out on the court. Like his 3 block per game days were also the days where he was like 3 personal fouls at the end of the first quarter, because they just didn't need him out there as much. But they just can't risk him now. Like he's going to have little flashback moments, Nam style, in his head where he sees someone going up and goes, "Not today," and puts his hands in his pockets. And wishes he could just smother them with his body and take a personal foul / block. But yeah, those days are gone.
Looking at some value, like, do you draft Zach Edey? If you're in an IR league, I'm not sure he's good enough to stash.
Yeah, I think there's just in a vacuum, I think that's a good play. But because there's so much value in that back end with centers, there's so many teams who are now like Indiana, a new backup center in Milwaukee, like Chicago, where they might have to let Vooch go. Like there's Brooklyn, hopefully Claxton getting back to where he is. I just think there's too many other good centers around that point that he wouldn't be my first choice.
Yeah, and I wonder if, and I've seen you do it, and I do it quite often. You're in an IR league, you've got the last pick in the draft, you can pick him up, you can throw him into IR, and then go pick up somebody from the waivers. I don't hate that, but if you're taking anyone injured before, Zach Edey's not worth holding out on. For opportunity early, I do think that maybe Brandon Clark is the guy to start the year. Plug to my NBL show. Huge Jock Landale fan. The Aussie coming along. But in reality, I probably think Gigi Jackson, Sani Aldama in the forward spots, and then Jaren Jackson at the center in a pinch. Jaren Jackson I'd love Jaren Jackson to defend like a center and Brandon Clark to play offense like a center in like my perfect fantasy storm. In which case that makes Brandon Clark a bit of a streamer, and he's probably I'll look at picking up super early if he's the guy that gets the nod at the start, and just see what happens from there.
Yeah, and something I was just thinking about then too is, we've just done the Clippers show where we're talking about injury risk potential and age, and the Grizzlies don't have that same problem. They're quite a young team and they're getting younger, where a team like the Clippers is old and getting older. But I crunched some numbers before, and Triple J, Santi Aldama, and Ja Morant over the last 5 seasons. I had to do a little bit of wiggling because this is Santi Aldama's 4th season. They've averaged 55 games as a trio, which is kind of worrying in an 82-game season. So when your 3 best offensive threats miss nearly 30 games there, give or take a year, that you just saying before with GG Jackson, he might be a sneaky grab. He might be a guy that you want to get with your last pick, because this team doesn't have a lot of scorers, and with the fragile nature of the 3 guys who are going to do the lion's share of your scoring in Triple J, Aldama, and Ja, I think, you just kind of set a light bulb off in my head, thinking it could be a guy to pick up with your last pick and see what happens, because there'd be an absolute scramble on him if any of those guys go down. They just need a guy who can score, and that's kind of what he does.
Yeah, and it's probably more like if it's the front court that gets injured, GG Jackson probably is the next man up. If it's in the guard spots, I am high on Ty Jerome. I think that he's a really good player. I think Scottie Pippen has done serviceable in the past. So if you start to see an injury in the backcourt, then it's probably those guys. If you start to see an injury in the front court, look at GG Jackson. Mate, is it? Look, it's kind of hard because it's Jaren Jackson Jr. Right up there, somebody that we'd draft. Ja Morant, you're not saying that you wouldn't draft him. You're just saying that you probably have him at 60 and you don't tend to get him there. Is there, which I'm struggling with, like I've Santi Aldama in like the 120s because I don't think he does a lot more other than scoring. Is there anyone you're really targeting or anybody you want? Or is it just, for fantasy, it's Ja Morant, it's Jaren Jackson Jr. or bust?
Yeah, basically. I think maybe the question could be flipped on its head with guys that I'm just staying away from. I think Ty Jerome isn't going to have the opportunities that he had last year in Cleveland, and a lot of his value was really weighed on his shooting percentages. Like, he was a freak last year, and per minute player, he was a delight. I'm a little bit edgy about Edie. I think Wells isn't going to step up enough this year to become fantasy relevant. He was a marvel last year for you and yours, but from a fantasy lens, he's a younger version of KCP, who ironically you have as well now. Like, this team probably doesn't have near as much fantasy value as other teams are going to have, and maybe that's why they'll be slept on a little bit. And I think I don't have the balls the size of yours to go Triple J that early, but I can also see a world where you are laughing and he plays more than 55 games. His blocks come back a little bit, and he could totally justifies a pick in the 20s.
Nope, I agree. Look, mate, that's we do some recordings a bit early in the preseason. That's us done for the night. Look, it was fun to have a chat about the Grizzlies, a team I'm excited about for watching, but not that excited about for fantasy. So, you've listened to a Ball Logic podcast. Cheerio.
All right.